This session brought to you by Odyssey Games for pre-orders and sealed product, CCG Prime for tons of singles and supplies, Cardo Doko for international rulers looking for products, and fowlibrary.com for articles and wonderful deck lists, as well as our guest lecturer members King Pearlshine, Vite Ramen, Mognite, and Darren Noblock. Class is in session.
Hello, rulers. Welcome back to the office hours with yours truly, Paul Reisman. Wow, this is a little different. The tables have turned, Mr. Jeremy Franklin. Would you want to say hi, Mr. Jeremy Franklin?
Hello.
Wow.
It has been a long week of Force of Will.
It has been a long weekend of Force of Will.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Absolutely. I don't know about you, but I crashed when I got back the other night. I just, for 2 days, I was just like, wow.
It was
so much
a lot.
fun. So much fun. Absolutely epic GP this past weekend. So I guess I'm in charge, which means that
you are in charge today.
Why would Jeremy do this? He knows I'm only going to talk about sandwiches all night long.
I'm giving you an opportunity here, right? I'm accepting the risk. I'm accepting the chance of the risk, and I'm hoping that it pays out dividends.
I think it will, because as much as I would love to talk about Force of Sandwiches all night long, I think everyone knows exactly what kind of sandwich Olga would eat, even though we never got to hear it. But for real, guys, I went to Jeremy earlier today. I think it was like either yesterday or today, and I just said, I've got things on my mind when it comes down to this GP. There are things that I really am just really feeling great about. There's some conversation that I've been having online with some folks in Facebook that made me think a lot. And so instead of, giving into the Facebook algorithm and doing this, I don't know, like rage posting sort of thing, or even just feeding that engine, we got a podcast.
We do.
So,
we do have a podcast. It's great.
Much better means of communication. Yeah.
Yeah. Before we get into your discussion,
yeah, go for it.
I do want to just kind of put this out there early. This past weekend was kind of like an LCQ. It felt like an LCQ to me, like a last chance qualifier kind of thing, because it was like a little bit unexpected that we were going to have more GPs before Worlds, but they were online, so they were like maximum access, but it was just one unpaid invite. There was no cash prizing. The promos were, great. I think the promo placements were absolutely great. But they were promos that are like reskins of older stuff as opposed to like the duets and stuff, which were like all unique. It felt like kind of we just wanted to give you some additional chances kind of an event. And so going into that, I expected like 40 to 50 players. So the fact that we got 68 was like, dang, and gives me a lot of excitement for an expectation for what the next two events are going to be like, and hopefully that they decide to start them earlier in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, gosh, it was 6 rounds, but it was a 9.5-hour stream.
Yeah,
it was a little wild.
Long.
Yeah, that was a lot. Oh my gosh. I guess like what I would like to talk about with you all tonight, and this is really just me like asking a bunch of questions of our community and just making some observations. And I just want to know, am I just like completely off base here? But I'm making some observations, and I think one of the main things that I took away from this GP was that the state of the game right now is just really ideal for casual and competitive play. It's like when I think of what I would like a TCG to be, this is it, right? Like this is probably exactly what I want. There's a high diversity of good decks. Deck piloting as well as deck building is really huge. Yes, I'm off base.
Wow, just even before the savage.
Patrick gives me love. I appreciate that, Pat. But I don't know. Like maybe I'm just off, right? Is casual and competitive play just really bad right now, and I'm just like so in love with this game I don't notice? What do you think?
No, I think you're not wrong, and I think we're back into an environment where casual and competitive play don't feel so separated as they once were. But also at the same time, the way that competitive play has evolved makes casual play more enjoyable despite the overlap. It's kind of that idea of like rising tide lifts all boats. That like the complexity of deck building and opportunities and things that you can do at a competitive level and the variety of kind of things that we've seen rather than just one deck wins then means that in the casual competitive crossover space you have more flexibility to be able to enjoy and deck build and get creative. Whereas old school FOW, it was like if like they were so competitive was so narrow that there was a force of having to have like a competitive or a casual mindset. You couldn't really do both. And that caused problems, but then the casual environment like accepted themselves and kind of staked their claim. And so then that kind of became like it was okay that they were really separate and people understood that. But now it's like evolving into something in a way that's not going back to the old way. It's still kind of like honoring the spirit of casual creativity in a competitive environment. And I think that that's really awesome to see. Like that's really awesome to see evolve. So yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly the old way, and I think there was an example of this before I even joined the game in SKL, right? There was the Baja Blast format. And if you're a new player, you probably have no idea what we're talking about because this is literally at the origin point of the game. But this was a Japanese card game. And so they were designing their sets and their cards in a very particular way that appealed to a more Japanese audience, which means you were sort of building toward this like one deck. That deck plays another version of that deck to try and inch out who's better in terms of skill piloting that deck. And then everything else was just kind of like crept out and was made more casual as a result. And we saw that time and time again. We saw it in Alice Cluster with R&R. Even after a rotation, we saw it with like with Necrolance decks, right?
Fox and Prisia.
Fox and Prisia. And then we saw it with Scheherazade, which is why I'm still like very concerned that Scheherazade exists in the format. But
I'm very surprised that no one at least tried her for the GP.
Yeah,
that was,
and then no one
like,
tried her.
No one even wanted to give it a shot.
Yeah, it was so crazy. I know at least in the game, there was a conscious decision, a conscious moment, I think, when we went into New Dawn Rises for for Cluster 5, right? When the company said, we are going to try and diversify our deck archetypes, and we are going to try and make them more diverse in general, right? So we're going to have multiple different kinds of decks that are all going to be viable, including older rulers going into newer rulers. And they mostly accomplished that even in that time.
Yeah. I think there's a piece too in terms of like honoring deck diversity that I think iSpy has done a good job in designing generic enough engines that multiple decks can make use of, which then leads you to like, okay, well, this is the end game engine. So then I have a lot of creativity of how do I get there? Like I can kind of forge my own path to get there. And that speaks to like the comment of Patrick saying like, oh, I wonder what end game engines 6 of the top 8 decks were utilizing with Black Witch and Pumpkin Witch and Black Witch. I would say that like getting rid of Asuka or getting rid of the combo ban of Pumpkin Witch and Asuka really solidified Pumpkin Witch Black Witch as one of those kinds of like, this is a known control deck end game finisher. But then you get where the creativity comes down to is it, okay, I can't get there early, so then how do I protect myself to get there? Or what supporting secondary win cons can I play to back it up, right? I think Derek's list is a really good example of that. Because, like, that man did not need Pumpkin Witch to kill you. Like, it was very clear in that deck that he could just, like, slam down Glowing Spiders, protect them, play this really good kind of mid-range tempo game, and then kill you that way, right? Or, you know, back pocket, like, you've given me an opening, I'm going to take advantage and kill you, right? And so that to me, I think is like, I think that's fine. And I think that encourages good piloting and deck building because it's not like, oh, I'm playing a Pumpkin Witch deck. It's okay, well, I'm a control deck mid-range control deck, my end game kind of avenue is Pumpkin Witch. Now I got to figure out the rest of what happens in the game, right? It's not just insert this here, right?
Yeah.
And I will say that I don't think that Black Witch plus Pumpkin Witch is the only avenue, but like it's like the clearest example of what I'm talking about, where it's like it's a self-contained little thing. I also kind of give credit to Logan, with the Seth Duet of Light Rhea kind of core of stuff. I was actually talking with our group earlier today about how I literally took Logan's deck list from top 8, cut out a bunch of cards, plugged in a bunch of other cards, put Almerius and Moonstart in it, and I was like, this looks like an absolute blast to play, right? Kind of like, so Fow's done a really good job of making the competitive deck space kind of like, it like starts as like plug in the engines that I want to play, and then the creativity comes in terms of how I support that. And I think that also helps facilitate that blend of casual competitive, right? Because it's not play this or bust. It's like, if I'm gonna play this, then I have to figure out the rest of the stuff around it, and so that still has to get. I still have to think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I I agree. Like, you're always on a timer, knowing that your opponent has like Black Witch in their deck. If they have Priscia, they have other ways to get to it. I mean, that's always going to be present there. Um, Yeah, I mean, Magic Zone Research Institute is probably my favorite way to close a game, right? Just like get a huge board and swing, right? That's also a huge win condition that, nobody's really talking about, but it exists and it's in these decks that we've seen kind of just all over the place, right?
Yeah, Logan puts up a good point here. It's
Yeah.
like Athena's an end game, 2020 Gundam's an end game. Just because you have something that doesn't kill your opponent immediately doesn't mean you have to close the door. Correct. Which is one of the reasons why I think that like Black Witch plus Pumpkin Witch now is like fine to exist in the environment, because it's just like it doesn't. You don't have to kill your opponent in one turn. You can just grind them out. I mean, like that's okay. That's acceptable. But sometimes it's nice to have that kind of like, you gave me an opportunity, I want to close the door now, kind of even in the back pocket. It can be helpful, but it's not necessary by all means.
Yeah.
So
It feels like the way I use that entire engine is like secondary or tertiary like win condition, right? And it's easy to slot in. Um,
yeah,
but it's by no
Derek only
means the
played
only thing.
2 Black Witches mained.
Yeah.
Just 2.
And no Priscia, right?
Correct.
So like he was gonna see it with all his draw power and stuff, but he didn't need it to win.
Right.
Um, so I guess like, so we've done this work, right? The chat seems to agree with us that, sure, like the game is very diverse right now. I'm still hearing this like older rulers aren't valid. And so one of the main things that I don't know what older rulers means, right? Do you mean
That's
like
true.
2-3 years ago? Do you mean like Grim from Grim Cluster old? Like, what are we talking about here? I'm not sure what you mean by that. But second of all, there's this phenomenon in trading card games, and name me one that doesn't have this issue, and I'll gladly just shut up, right?
That's not an LCG. Keep that in mind.
That's not an
Specifically
LC, like
TCG.
specifically a trading card game, right? Power creep exists. So how do you make older rulers more fun or more valid in the current environment? I think that's a valid question. But to say that you have to play hero cluster rulers and that's it, I won't have fun otherwise. Right? I'm wondering where that's coming from.
Yeah, I
Right?
think there's a piece of like, I think part of that comes with the natural element of like the identity of rulers and people of all the cards in the game. I think players who play Force of Will, we get attached to the characters that are on the rulers themselves. Like more so than anything else, we talk about people talking about pet rulers, like people that they, rulers that they played, and it's just like they want to come back to it. And when you're in a wanderer environment where that ruler is legal, there's a part of you like, well, I want to go back and start playing my pet deck again. I want to go back and start playing. We all have. I mean, even back in Yu-Gi-Oh, it was me with like Mecha Phantom Beasts and Madolches and XYZs, like or in wind-ups. Like I had archetypes, I had character identities that I really connected with, and so anytime you have opportunity to play those, you want to play it. And I think for FOW, it's a little bit more titrated or focused because of the fact that it's specific characters as opposed to like full archetypes, right? So it's the idea of like
Sure.
I can take the character of Dark Alice and scrap the original 40 cards that he was originally using, and then I can try to see about playing her with all new cards. And it's like, well, then that feels bad if I can't make that work, right? I can't make my favorite character work even with a full deck of 40 newer cards. So I think there's this natural kind of trap that you can fall into with that. But I also think that, like, I think people have sometimes given FOW a mission that FOW didn't give itself, which is to solve the problem of power creep, which they can't do because no TCG can, because it's a business at the end of the day. I do think that in the past 3 years, I mean, I think especially with the introduction of the combination ban list and stuff like that, they're certainly trying to do away with like, they're significantly slowing down the exponential explosion that we had like going from DBV into through Alice Origins, right?
Yeah.
Like they've certainly tried to address it, and I think they've been having success as much as they can put the brakes on it. But I also think too that like our tournament reports for now, for moving forward, we're going to look at top 16, not top 8 anymore, because the top 16 of this event was also really indicative of like a true sense of what had a shot at this event. Because if you look at the top 16 of this event, it's like more of the aggressive strategies that got bad matchups in their win-ins, or like just couldn't quite, or like had an unfortunate draw and just like couldn't quite close it. But had the pairings been different or the day been different, absolutely could have won. Oct, Violet, Order Alice, Vega, like all of these, Violet, like single rulers, tag rulers, Eins, like had a shot. But I mean, you also have to remember that pairings play a factor into what tops an event, but that doesn't mean that they're not relevant or viable, because sometimes you just get a bad matchup, right?
Yeah.
Steven's in the chat, and Steven is a perfect example of, I think his Oct deck was well positioned. I think his Oct deck was very well positioned to go into that top 8, and he got paired up against the man main boarding an Illusionary Mermaid, and Castle of Belial. Like, I mean, and it was the pair down, by the way, because that guy was undefeated going into the last round.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so, like, the unfortunate part there of, like, who could have anticipated that Steven would have gotten the pair down there? Like, Steven couldn't have, but that happens in tournaments, but that doesn't mean that Steven's deck isn't viable, or that the aggro strat or the red base strat isn't viable. Same with Violet or Order Alice or whatever.
Yeah.
So
what's helpful is like Steven is offering some good points in the chat, because he's mentioning how even though it's Wanderer and even though it feels like the expectation was set, you get to play all of these older rulers and all of these older cards, it still just feels like the new cluster is the way to go, right? And I get that, right? I get how that's like the purpose of going to Wanderer was to like open everything up and make all cards accessible and stuff, and I totally get that. So why then is it
yeah,
always just the New Frontier stuff that's good?
but that's what I'm saying is like that's a
Yeah.
challenge that's a goal that people gave I Spy that I Spy didn't give for themselves. Like they didn't say we're going to Wanderer so you can play rulers from 4 years ago.
Mm.
Right? They said we're going to Wanderer because we want people to be able to play all of the cards of the history.
Right.
And if you look at top 8 decks and creativity in decks, we have decks playing super old cards, making use of the expanded card pool. The ruler might be a newer ruler, but they are still making use of older cards that they wouldn't have been able to see before. So like, that's you see what I mean? Like that's people giving I Spy and the identity of Wanderer a goal in mind that I Spy didn't.
Right. So
And so there's a
it's like a
disconnect there.
projection almost, right?
Correct.
Yeah. It's like, well, that makes sense to me because then you get access to everything else and I get to play my old deck again, but that's not what I Spy actually said. That's why
Right.
we're
They
doing
did.
this,
They
right?
didn't say. They didn't say we're making it Wanderer so that you can go bring um Alice Origins Melgus to a top 8 event now. 3, or that you can suddenly bring Kaguya, or like you can suddenly play uh Nine-Tailed Fox at a competitive level again.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I also think that speaks to the idea of casual versus competitive, or the blending of them, because like you can go play at a local environment in the Wanderer environment and have fun with those older rulers, right? But you're not limited to, in your local environment, you're not limited really by those kinds of things unless your locals is like hyper competitive, right? And you have that freedom. And now
Yeah.
that's officially supported by the company, as opposed to just like, well, our store plays Wanderer. Right? It's like an
Right.
officially supported idea. But then the competitive environment is still like you have to accept that there are natural limitations to older cards that as card games evolve might not be successful. And that's not what the company was trying to stop from happening.
Yeah.
Um, so
Well, I think where this would probably hurt if I were to like interpret this, right, and if I was going to put myself in the shoes of these players,
sure.
it would probably be like either like tabletop, right, just like kitchen table, or at my locals, right, where this would hurt the most, right, because like new person comes in, they're a spike, they want to play Aristella, Dexy's Advice, Wombo Combonus, and I just have my little Shayla deck that I bought a structure deck for, right? Um,
Right.
like that's understandably frustrating. I think there's other ways to address that issue, and I have some experience in that. There's other ways to address that issue without saying like Wanderer is a complete mistake, right?
Yeah. I don't think that shipping to Wanderer is a complete mistake at all, to be honest.
Yeah,
It has me a lot more interested in deck building. It has me a lot more interested in the idea of like, even if I can shoehorn it, like the idea of like, even if I can go take 2 different cards that I play at least 2 of from a super old cluster in a new deck idea, like that to me is like, I can't do that. If I was playing New Frontiers, I wouldn't even think about this. Like, I think a good example is my blue, white, black Aristella deck. Literally played a card from every cluster but Rhea.
yeah.
Like, deck would not have been possible if I was playing in New Frontiers, and it would look way
Hmm.
different, and I probably would not have nearly as much fun with it. It would feel a lot more bland. Um, and I think the surprise factor and the like, wow, that's such a cool idea, happens way more often in deck building that I see now that we're in Wanderer than it ever did in New Frontiers. I
Hmm.
think, like, Steve, I'm gonna speak to Steven again. This man dropped a friggin' Vingolf 3 Bahamut, and I was like, that's dope. That's friggin' dope. Would not have thought about that, but it's cool that he did it. Like, wow. Like, and that's the thing to me that Wanderer, I think now the difference between Wanderer and New Frontiers is that's the kind of I think that's the experience that I Spy is trying for. Of like, you'll be playing the newer rulers, but you have the entire card pool to come up with some cool, crazy things that you couldn't have done if we were just doing rotation. And I think that's the mission of it. Like, it keeps you looking back at the old cards, right?
Yeah,
And it's not necessarily that you're going to build a whole deck of the old cards competitively, but like, you're going to find that one, you're going to find those 2, you're going to find those 3 that are like, wow, this really inspires me to try something cool. And there you go, right? So that's me. That's my piece of that.
yeah. Well, I think what's interesting about that is I think people forget that we're still in the third set of the cluster that initiated this change, right? So like we
Mm-hmm.
were moving to Wanderer heading into this cluster, and so it's been 6 months of gameplay in this current format in which we have Wanderer
Yeah.
available to us, right? And so even the next set with like Aristella being able to fetch a Groom Cluster ruler, like that kind of says the company is aware that you want to
Mm-hmm.
play with older rulers and interact with older characters.
I don't know why Wanderer and New Frontier can't exist side by side. I think that's a point of I Spy not wanting to half-ass two things, but whole-ass one thing. The company
Yeah.
is small. I Spy is a small company, and to split focus, splits focus both in terms of set design and in terms of like competitive environment and it also splits focus in terms of like what promos are we printing. It splits focus in terms of like, well, what are we going to do to the ban list? Are we going to do the New Frontiers ban list? Are we going to do the Wanderer ban list? Like, what's going on? And so I think because of the company's size, I think they made the decision to switch to Wanderer, which felt more likely to have them be able to do whole decisions about and maintain a better game state. Because a New Frontiers ban list doesn't matter in a year and a half. You have to almost completely rebuild the ban list from the ground up. And that's complicated to do. Like if you think about the idea of like maintaining a ban list for a rotating format, like that's a lot of work. Because like, do we really need to ban this card? It's going to be gone in 3 months. Do we ban this card? Okay, well, cool. Well, now we lost a block. So we're going to erase half of the ban list. And then we have to wait a minute. Is that card really bannable? Because now we have to think about what's coming up in the new cluster. Like, it's a lot more complicated than to be able to maintain a ban list for an entire Eternal format that all we're doing is adding cards. We're not taking away entire swaths of cards, right? I think that's a lot simpler. Only doing one type of event for one format means that you're more likely to get a consistent crowd size rather than to say like, okay, well, we're going to do an event in the Northeast part of the country. Do we do Wanderer or New Frontiers? What do we think is going to attract more players? Okay, we're going to do a West Coast one, or we're going to do an online one. Do we do the online one, New Frontiers or Wanderer? Okay, we're going to do an event in Europe. Okay, what about Worlds? Like, there's just a lot of complications that a bigger game could probably manage by having much more independent teams and bigger set design rather than just 112 card sets. That
$1
the
billion more
pivot,
dollars.
yeah, that the pivot to Wanderer enables for a more streamlined simplicity and decision making and less decision trees about the behind the scenes. That I think that's why they made the swap to not support New Frontiers. That's my theory. I
Yeah.
have no idea if that's what it was, but like in my mind, as someone who works with systems, like works with systems theory and does like marriage and family therapy and all of those other things in terms of like try to find the way to remove complications as much as possible so that you can focus on the things that really matter. That to me makes a lot of sense. So that's me.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a good observation. Like the more decisions you have to make makes your job a lot harder as the tournament provider, right? Like if you're TOing and you're trying to like get everything together, you have to think about, well, do I have enough judges for the New Frontiers and the Wanderer event simultaneously? And um, while I wish Force of Will was in that place, I think in a lot of ways, this new company is still trying to get its feet from underneath itself, right? It's trying to figure out how do we do this card game in a way that's consistent and sustainable as opposed to novel and unique. Um,
Yep.
and I think that's the stage of Force of Will we're in right now. So I mean, like Wanderer just makes a bunch of sense. It means they can repackage older product and sustain themselves that way, spend less money. Um,
Yeah, I think that's Steven brings up an interesting point of like I think one of the biggest hurdles when you really boil down to it for a lot of players who are newer talking about the idea of Wanderer is card access, right?
that's
And
real.
I think that's the biggest piece here. Singles are available. I will say that CCG Prime, one of our sponsors, has like over 500,000 singles starting in Grim Cluster to current. So like
Hmm.
you can find those older cards. But some of it is even like card knowledge, right? Walking into an event and not having the card knowledge from everything else of like what was good or what was bad. And so I think that is a hurdle that still needs to be tackled in terms of like, is it the Wanderer reprint set that they've kind of like talked about? Is it like trying to slot in more cards per set? Is it doing another run of Memoria? As much as that is weird, like what if we just replaced the card like life point cards in sets? What if we replaced those with like a chunk of Memoria every set, where it's
Right.
just like we just replace those with or doing memorials again, right? In that same
Hmm.
kind of vein of just like, hey, these are legal to use, and it's a way to kind of get them in your pocket. So like, is it designing a new set? Isn't that it? Something there. There's something there, right? That I
Yeah.
can understand the frustration for players in that regard. That's totally fair. But I don't think it diminishes, I think, the overall health that is brought to the game by the pivot to Wanderer
Hmm.
for longevity's sake. Longevity's sake.
Yeah, I think memorials were a really really good idea because it gave people access to promos that never had access to them before,
Mm-hmm.
and so like more of that got out into the card pool, um, and it's just helpful. Plus promos that are actually functionally helpful, right? Like the Melfi promo or rewriting laws, um,
Yeah.
Look of
Shackles
Corruption,
Vice.
Shackles of Ice,
Look of
Pumpkin Witch. We literally
Corruption.
just got Pumpkin Witch the promo, right? Um, like all of those cards are like genuinely good, and they should be driving people to locals because they're actually not only good looking but functionally good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think we're getting there, right? I think we're
Yeah,
getting closer. Um, but I mean, growing pains for sure. Like that is the
yeah,
one point of like the conversation of New Frontiers versus Wanderer that like I can feel those growing pains. I understand that.
yeah. I mean, transitions take a lot of energy and a lot of time,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they're not clean, right? Which is why I think
Nope.
it's premature for us to say like, oh, the game is dying because it's only hero cluster rulers that are at the top, and so that means that no other new players can come in. I I just don't subscribe to, like, you can tell me that sure the game is having these growing issues and like it might need to address those, sure. To then go from that to say the game is dying is really difficult for me to get on board with, right? Because
Yeah.
I have enough general anxiety to know that that's catastrophizing, right?
Yeah.
To say that the game is dying because my experience has some quirks to it that aren't ideal. Um, I can't subscribe to that, which is why I disagree so readily with that idea, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it has been a bit since we've seen that, Steven, for sure. It's certainly the comments of people saying like, "Oh, dead game, doomsday or whatever," mostly comes in like people commenting on YouTube videos or like the off the cuff comment on Facebook. I think the Discord servers have pretty much like culled a lot of those people. Um, and good because it's annoying. But I will say a lot of the, I think even more so, a lot of the voices are people who have pretty much are known to have been pretty checked out for a while.
Hmm.
So then like there's just not as much weight, or it doesn't catch the eye as much as it used to, which is nice. Because I was so tired of dealing with that constantly. And I've just, I was talking with Paul about this earlier. Is I think I've in the span of the past like week and a half, especially seeing this event, like a blind event, getting 68 players and having such a cool diversity of top 16, and like watching the stream all day on Saturday and Sunday and seeing the people having a good time and like playing such creativity, I think has really just put me in a position of like, if people want to walk away, even if there's someone that I know, just let them walk, right? You don't have to like fight to convince them to stay. It's kind of one of those like, they say like, if a bully tells you you're stupid, you just like respond by saying, yeah, okay. You know what
Yep.
I mean? Like you just like kind of yes and them a little bit of just like and. And so I think it's kind of that same response for the people saying like game is dead or all the problems. Like, okay, you have those problems, and is that all you want to say? That like let them steam themselves out, but like, or just don't engage.
Yeah.
That's for me.
The game doesn't actually have to be dying for people to think it is, right? And it's not ours to like take that on, right? Like that doesn't give me a good time.
Did that one guy who did the history of FOW ever put out a part two? He and I are in communication. He and I actually I was super appreciative of Monkey Fight TCG for being willing to work on that project. I actually reached out to him in response to one of his videos about all the new card games, because I watched that video, saw that he talked about Force of Will in it, and then I reached out to him and said, "Hey, I've been trying to see if there are other bigger YouTubers who are interested in talking about FOW, kind of what it is now. Would you like to collaborate on something?" And he was kind enough to say, "Yeah, let's make a video." So I'm like super grateful for that opportunity to be able to work with him. And I know that he wants to do a part 2, but like he's got other projects too. It can't just be 100% FOW, but it's in the works. Something's there. So the stop having fun mentality. The game died in 2016. Yeah, I really like the people who quote my like individual viewership numbers back at me as some kind of indicator. Look, like when the game started, your videos were getting 15,000 views per video, and I'm like, they weren't. Like I have some videos that have a bunch of views, but it's like, old videos were usually like 5 to 6,000 over the course of like 2 to 3 months. I'm sure videos now don't get that much, but I still get like 17,000 views a month across all the videos on the channel. So like people still watching FOW content.
Yeah.
Right? Like
it's there.
You don't have my analytics. Don't quote my analytics at me. Like stop.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what that project is all about. That's like, you're telling me you know my data better than I do? It's really weird.
Rustin. Hello, Rustin.
Hello.
But yeah. I think that there's, we're still figuring things out, but we're figuring things out in a way that's a lot more safe and fun than the ship has a hole in it and we're sinking. We need to fix this now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we got like what 20 minutes left of this podcast. What has the Force of Will company done well since Hero Cluster began? Since official switch? Yeah, let's talk about the things that went well.
I think the promo choices have been absolutely on point. It's done a really, really good job with those, both at the GP level and at the internal level. I will say, kind of as a heads up to that, like the nature of US distribution and kind of shame on some of the distributors for this is that like promos don't get distributed well necessarily. There are stores that still struggle to get promos. I will say Landon and Svetlana are trying to help with that. And like, some of the distributors certainly care more than others, with like YY Card World and GTS distribution, but like Southern Hobby is kind of just like really notorious for being bad at promos, and some people can only use Southern, so like that's a problem. And some of that is maybe like FOW, I Spy needing to be kind of more aggressive towards them, but also some of that might just be Southern Hobby not giving a crap, which is probably fair. So like the promos have been on point. I think the combination ban list has been so insanely good.
Oh yeah. A real innovation, I'd say. Yeah, restarting the YouTube channel. Absolutely, that was
restarting
huge.
The YouTube channel,
bringing back the King of Will, and restarting your channel.
Oh my gosh, so I knew for about a month and a half before that video happened that EG was coming back, and I died. I'm dead. This is my ghost.
Welcome back.
Because like EG and I have been great. The bond that I have with EG, that I formed with him doing FOW before he left, and like when everything happened, like really meant a lot to me, especially the fact that like he and I kept in touch after he left, and I like got to help with alternate souls and everything else, and to know that like, because that was a weird time, right? So like him and Jeff left, Rob left, like I was kind of the only one left of the like OG people, and so there was this piece of like, do I stay or do I go, right? Who do I follow? Kind of what do I do? So then to have EG still, after, still maintain the friendship, and then to come back and be like working with me on FOW again, and there was no hard feelings, no whatever, just like a genuine joy from him to be supporting this thing that he wanted to create for so long and be able to come back to it was just like a full circle to me of like, cool, I made the right decision to like keep going for this game because it wasn't about the people, it was about the game, and I
Mm-hmm.
also didn't lose anyone. The kind of like best of both worlds kind of thing. So EG coming back was huge for me, and also I've said this to people before the GP stream, like I want to sit Rio down and just like learn everything about that man. I'm
Who's the
Rio,
man
the host
behind
of
the
every
mask?
single time. I'm Rio, the host of this show. I'm like, you're damn right you are Rio. You're the host of this show. Like, freaking, I stand Rio, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's so great. Every single time he picks up the phone to talk to the dev team, I'm just like, gets me every time. But like, I think they've really, I think they've found their voice in a way that is more clearly intentional than it's ever been before.
Oh yeah. I would absolutely agree with that. It like there's a decisiveness and a calculatedness to the decisions that are being made by this company. Um which I don't think I could ever say. I'm not saying like that it was never that case before, but they've gotten so much better at it in this major transition they've been going through since Saga Cluster, right? Since like Alice Origins was kind of like the last time the dev team was doing stuff during the AG era, and now like going into Saga Cluster, we got this like brand new vision um that is honestly still kind of unfolding, right? Like we have not seen the end of this roadmap yet. Um I really appreciate sort of ever since probably Alice Origins, right? That there's been a concerted effort by the company to make staples in a variety of rarities, right? So like there are normals that are so good, they're getting reprints as promos, right? Like Dispelling Stone, the new Kilo of Spells a normal. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just fantastic, and I just deeply appreciate that.
I do want to speak
um,
to one thing real quick. So Dan
yeah,
says that GTS has not gotten any in for like 6 months. I'm on the GTS website right now, and I don't have a store account because I'm not a store, but they have listed October, September, January 2023, February 2023, March 2023, November of 2022, August, December 2022. Like, they seem to have them on their websites. So I don't know what that's about. That if you can't get them from GTS.
yeah, that's
So I
weird.
just wanted to speak I just wanted to speak to that real quick.
No,
I'm not
that's
a
good.
store, so I can't see, but like their items on their website. So like
Yeah,
yeah, the company's community interaction has been insane. The Wanderer ban list has been insane. Oh, they're listed but none available. Okay,
that makes more
interesting.
sense.
Maybe someone like ordered them all, which then speaks to uh again a distro not caring. Um, which is a
Pauper
hurdle
Direct
for
is a
sure.
thing. Yeah, I mean
Pauper
Pauper is a great format, right? Um,
certainly got weirder with the change from commons and uncommons to normals.
yeah, I mean that's certainly true. I put together one of those lists and it's kind of fun. I mean there was definitely some lack of diversity, but I think for newer players, like just getting a handle on the basic mechanics and then having like good normal cards to slot into your normal decks, right? Like once you get into the Wanderer scene, I think there's a benefit there for newer players. Um, yeah, so I mean, I think the company is by and large in a very 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 good place. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's much I would change, more that I would improve, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that I would say like reverse course on this, please. I think it's more like stay the course, keep doing what you're doing, and then try to improve it. I would say that like, can we get rid of typos? Oh, we've got quite a few typos lately. I didn't know
Yeah,
Aristella was a girl. Aristella's not a girl, but like the most recent video declared that Aristella is a she. I was like, probably not. It's not true. Um,
unless.
Nope. So, you know, I think there's a piece of doing the in terms of an improvement, right? I think that the community versus company versus and community communication and contact and like availability has certainly improved. I would love to see that kind of further improved
Hmm.
through like starting to go to conventions again, having representatives to be able to talk to distributors and stuff. Just like kind of rebuilding the network that was around before the change. I mean, it wasn't like super around, but like rebuild it, recreate that. Um,
Hmm.
because there's always going to be that element of like stores got burned or felt that they got burned, so like you just can't go back to that. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to do something. Um, and I think other than that, it's just continue to do what they're doing because they're doing great work. I
Hmm.
think.
Yeah, I would say like just embracing more marketing opportunities and communicating with the community in ways that are, um, obviously like some companies have to have some gatekeeping in terms of their communications, and I get that. Um, but there was something about Jeff communicating with people that was really, really helpful, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
if we could ever get that back, I mean, that'd be the ideal. If we never did, I also wouldn't be shocked, right? But progressing toward
I think they're
communicability.
working towards it, right? With like
Yeah,
EG and Rio, like they're trying to build a similar kind, like they're trying to get back to that in a sense. Um, uh, Positive is we got secret rares back. Yeah, the secret rares are pretty
absolutely.
dope. I'm glad to have those chase cards back for sure. I,
Dude,
I
those things
also
look
think a
good.
positive is like uh, the consistent speed of which we are finding solutions to problems.
Yeah,
Right now, it's obviously better if the problems don't happen in the first place. Totally granted, right? But not having problems and proving the ability to solve problems quickly are two different things.
very
And
different.
so this is still very, very good to have and should be given credit for, right? Um, that I think that's just worth saying. Um, did you answer questions on the channel? Yes. Hi, Eris. Are events happening for all of you guys mainly online now, excluding GP events? I mean, I think that's up to stores
Hmm.
to take a chance and like run events, right? I will say, I will say that we here at Ruler School are working on a project to make it so that stores have an easy way to run events with cool pricing that is a self-sustaining system to kind of fill that gap, culminating in FowFest every year. So like we're working on it. Gotta get company approval before we can do it. So stuff's in the works. But online events are kind of the major kind of go-tos, unless you have a store that's really committed to the game right now, which is kind of fair for most like tier 2 games, to be honest. It's like if you have a committed community, they'll put them together. Like you can't just like casually find big scale Weiss Schwartz events unless you're like in an area that has a bunch of Weiss Schwartz players, right?
That's real.
Or you go online, right? So we're in that same kind of venue. So my thoughts there.
Yeah, the fact that like Death Metal and Warhorse got hit the set after they were released, and we were told why, and the metagame improved, like that. I have never seen a company do that, right? I've never seen Konami do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oh no, 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 we gotta sell the product and then we can ban the card.
If you're talking about the style of the GP Platinum promos with the characters having color, then I would be down for those as promos. Yeah, those are pretty sick. Like I have them;
Yeah,
they're very nice. They like we thought they were Ubers because we saw the chromatic pictures of them, but then when you see them in person, they're more like a platinum finish, which I think is
hmm,
very very cool. Um, yeah.
yeah.
Teacher Nook, we're happy to be a hub. Been playing this game for 8 years. Don't plan on stopping anytime soon. And I'm gonna keep making content for all of that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, I'm just looking at my list of things I would want I Spy to improve on. We've already touched on like reprinting older cards and giving players access to those cards. Um, Giving us like really solid structure decks in Aristella and Asuka was really great.
I would love to see
Um,
more starter decks.
yeah,
I think I'd like to see starters every 2 sets instead of every cluster,
yeah, I agree.
or at the very least a like second wave of starter decks.
Hmm.
Like it can even be the same starter decks, but just another wave of them. But I don't know how printing companies work. So like the idea of them being able to kind of reset up a print run of another set of the starters, like I can understand maybe not doing that. One starter deck per cluster does get a little dicey sometimes, but they're still good.
Yeah, I mean, like getting the Aristella and the Asuka starter decks were like a sure way of getting all of your contracts, which was, the early days really good. Um, and then just figuring out how to support older archetypes, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
how do we breathe air into something like inheritance, right? Um, like if
By
people want
using
that
the
ruler to be
inheritance keyword again.
by using the inheritance keyword again and actually doing something beneficial with that keyword, right? Um, so like juicing that up. I know what Yu-Gi-Oh's doing right now is they actually put a like community poll out there and people got to vote on what structure decks they wanted to see. And so we got like Crystal Beast structure decks and like other archetype decks that were like these archetypes are dead and they suck. And now they're actually decent. Um
Mm-hmm.
so like I take some inspiration from that and writing that down. But that's really all I really need from the company at this point. More
Yeah.
pandas. I agree. More pandas. More mermaids. Sandwich archetype.
Ascended Rayos ruler, please. Yeah, it's like these little things that I would put it, 2 years ago, I would say that I had a needs list, right? Of like things were going, things needed to be fixed and needed to be figured out. So I had a list of needs. I would say that currently my list of needs is much shorter and less weighty in terms of like necessity for keeping this game flowing, and my stress level down. And my wants list, my like wish list, is kind of where more things are. Where it's like I wish these things were here, but like if they don't, I'm okay, right? And that I think speaking, um, that to me is speaking to like the overall health of the game. If my wish list far overcomes my like needs list, and keep that in mind when I talk about needs list, I'm talking about like for the community as a whole. Like
Yeah.
it's not me personally. Like in my position of what we do here, like I have to be considerate of the needs list of being like the community as a whole, right? And if my wish list far overshadows my needs list, then that to me is an indicator of like good health. Um, which is good. Java. So wait, if you don't have contracts you wanted at that point in time, you can't get them now. That's not true. The contract reprint pack certainly helped that a lot, and there's a bunch of War of the Sun products still available out there in the world.
Yeah.
The starter decks are still available, though a little bit pricier. You can still get the contracts in set boxes of set 1, which are still available in different places. You can still get the boxes in set 2. Like, contracts are still very much available.
Yeah. I think what I was saying that it was at the time where we were saying, oh, we need more contract printing. And we got that
Right.
information to the company. And it was like, okay, so if you're a newer player and you want contracts, like one of the best ways to get them is to do the Aristella and Asuka deck. Um, and then we just waited on the reprints and we got the contract pack. So,
What about a 2-player starter, Panda versus Mermaid? Yeah, a 2-player battle kit would be, again, that's a wish list for a
again,
product design.
yeah,
Thanks.
like Varia Melgas back in the day.
Yeah, Odyssey still has War of the Sun boxes for sale. Yep, you can go to their website right now. You can buy
Hmm.
them. Never seen any of the newer starter decks anywhere on any site, not even eBay. So you're saying this is completely new to me? No, like they should still be. Places should still have them. They might be a little bit pricier. Like if you look on TCG Player, I believe they have the start. I'll look it up right now.
Yeah, doing this live.
Let's go.
Doing this live.
Doing it live.
Yeah, I really did like the Belgasfaria dual decks. I thought it was a really cool idea of just like a couple of friends
the
buying
Asuka
it.
ones and the Aristella one is way too expensive on TCG Player. I don't know why someone's charging that much, but there is definitely the Asuka one still available at a reasonable price on TCG Player.
I swear they're on Amazon.
Let's go check on Amazon.
We're checking Amazon. Dan saying he still has starters on his site.
The Villains and Tails ones, yeah, $32. Amazon Prime, Aristella starter deck. That's too much. That's still pricey, but it is available. Let's see if there's any Asuka ones. There's not any Asuka ones that I see. But there's one on TCG Player. And we still have them at Odyssey Games. I can see if Odyssey can post their starter decks online as well. Although we try to typically Odyssey tries to keep starter decks exclusively in store for like newer players, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Protag tax is beating waifu tax.
Maybe.
Collector's Cash has them as well. Oh, okay.
Meta tax. From fairy tale focus to anime style, I think it's always been anime style. I don't think it ever moved away from fairy tales as like a focus. That was just kind of like Grimm's theme, right? And like we've had fairy tale rulers pretty much ever since the game came out. So yeah. So I just think that goes back to what we were saying earlier about how, like Jeremy's saying that we wish we had structure deck printings like twice a cluster as opposed to one.
Yeah.
Because then like, oh, here's structure decks. Like there's actually like access to them for you out there, as opposed to having to buy sets. Also, yes, Aristella literally uses fairy tales as well. He is the fairy tale ruler. Among other things.
Oh yeah, there's absolutely. You can buy the Asuka deck right now for $15 on Collector's Cash. Just looked it up. $15.
There you go.
And they have Aristella ones too. Totally available right now.
Yeah, they're out there.
They exist.
And if you find them and buy them, that tells them that, oh, if we stock this, people will buy them. So they order them. Right?
A concern is product fatigue if you pump out too many products. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that's why right now I think I would prefer second wave of starters, middle of the cluster, because that to me, it can be a smaller wave. Like it can be a smaller second wave, but like a second smaller wave of starter decks, middle of the cluster, for the people who are like, oh, I'm getting in at set 3, but I'm like, this cluster seems interesting, or like my friend bought a starter deck and then picked up a couple boxes and I'm having fun with it. I want to maybe give it a try too, right? That to me is like why it would be better than just try to build a whole new product every two sets. So, did iSpy ever think about collabing with other animes like what Magic is doing? I think they're a small enough company that's not on their radar right now. I mean, they did the collab with Ghost in the Shell, and that turned out to be really weird.
Yeah, it hit some things and it missed some others, I would say.
Yeah, IMO but playable. That's okay. See the beginning of our conversation.
Welcome
IMO is
back.
absolutely IMO is absolutely playable in the like locals level environment. You can have a
Yeah.
pretty good time with IMO. Like, have you seen
IMO is
Starfall Dragon? Have you
very
seen
fun.
Starfall Dragon?
Card's good. Card's amazing.
Card's good.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's all I had for tonight.
That's all you had. You
That's
did a
all
good
I had.
job, Paul, and you led the conversation well.
Oh my gosh. Look at
I
me.
would allow you to do this again.
Oh my goodness.
And
That's so great.
I will even, you know what? I'll give you a bonus. You may ask one sandwich question
Oh,
with permission. With permission from
wow.
the headmaster, you may ask
That's
one
pretty
sandwich question.
that's pretty impressive. Okay. We've asked a lot of sandwich questions during this channel's history. But one thing I've always wanted to know is what sandwich would a ruler never eat?
Ooh. Anything from Jimmy John's because they're against the CEO because he hunts wild animals.
Oh. Ethical?
He's bad, and he's a
Appreciate that.
bad person. He's a bad person. So they
He's a
just
bad
wouldn't eat
person.
anything. He just wouldn't eat anything from Jimmy John's for the ethical considerations.
Gotcha.
That's my answer.
I'd probably say like a cheese sandwich, right? Which is
Basic
like
cheese sandwich,
it's
not a
it's
grilled
like
cheese.
not a grilled cheese, a cheese sandwich. Bread, cheese, that's it.
That's a fair point. Well, with that, thank you all so much for watching. I've been Demo73, and I have been hosted by Paul Reisman.
That's me.
And until next time, class dismissed.
Bye, guys.